Hey everyone, it's me again here at Amy Talks. This is episode number 5, and the title may have caught your attention. I know this passage in the Bible definitely caught mine. So today we're going to talk about John chapter 20 and John chapter 21. Two different passages, two different things that are happening, series of events, but one central message: Jesus made you breakfast. And we'll circle that in, reel it in, explain how both chapters tie in together at the end. But first, I want to explain why I'm going to talk about these passages the way I'm going to talk about them. So in my church, our youth pastors do an event every other month, like the first Friday. It's called a Code Blue. And this is a special youth event where they'll do just like different games and activities specifically for the youth. And a lot of them are focused on Bible study, Bible trivia, Bible questions, things like that. So one of the things that they do in these Code Blues is called Cover to Cover. And I love this because they literally will take a part of the Bible, say like Job chapter 1, and they'll say, okay, Johnny, you start reading verse 1, and then you go around in a circle, everybody reads a verse, and everybody just stops if somebody has something to say or has a question about what's being read. So we just read it, and then we just talk about what we're reading. No pressure, nothing too serious. We're really just reading the Bible and trying to interpret it as we go together as a team. So that's how I'm going to read John chapter 20 and John chapter 21. Because I like to break it down bit by bit, focus on the details, and just talk about what God is speaking to me and share that with you. And I'm sure God will show you something probably different than what He showed me. And that's why I love reading the Bible. Something that one of the pastors in my church, Pastor Omar, what he talks about a lot when you're reading the Bible, he says, it's in Spanish, no te comas la coma, but in English it means don't eat the comma. So if you're reading a verse and it has a comma, stop there, pause, analyze what you read before you go on to the next part, because you could be missing something important because you just read the whole sentence at once. Okay, and there's a reason why the reader or the author, the writer, had you stop at that point, even if it was just for a moment. And another thing, the head pastor at my church, Pastor Carlos, he always says he likes to kind of make like a movie in his head about what the Bible is saying, because I don't know about most of you, but I'm a visual learner. So I have to have a visual aid. I have to see in my head how things happened. And once I do that, it helps me retain information and it helps me understand the passage better. All right, so let's get into it. John chapter 20, we'll start. This is NLT. Early on Sunday morning, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and found that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. So while it was still dark, this is after Jesus gave his life on the cross. While it was still dark, Mary Magdalene took time, went early, like before anybody else was up, before anybody else was out doing anything. And I imagine her like just sneaking up to the cross, like to the tomb, and being like, I think in my head, this woman had a lot of faith, because I think partially maybe she wanted to see if he really was dead. I think maybe she wanted to see if they really killed him, because from her perspective, they killed him. Even though the Bible says he gave his life, obviously we know that as believers post crucifixion. But at the moment, those who are seeing him be brutally killed. And so she has to have this faith to say, I'm just going to go see, maybe he's still there. Or she could have also thought, man, I can't believe he's gone. Let me go at least be by his tomb where he's at. Okay. And then she goes to see that the stone was rolled away. I don't know about you, but how would you feel if a loved one of yours I just lost my dad in March, and we still have not been able to bury his ashes. We wanted to have a special place to bury his ashes. It hasn't worked out yet, but we have his urn. And if I had buried my father and then later on I go visit where he's at, where his body lies, and I see that it's been uncovered and there's nothing in there, I would be absolutely freaking out. I would be losing my mind. I'd be a Karen. I'd be like, who did what with my dad? Why, when, why didn't you tell me what happened? Like, I'd be losing my mind. So imagine this woman who dearly loves Jesus, who had an experience with Jesus, who just absolutely adores him, and she loses him, just like all the other believers, felt, wow, like he's gone, he left us. They took him away, whatever they're thinking. And then she goes to go be by his tomb to at least maybe mourn the loss, because she maybe doesn't know if he's coming back, or maybe she does think he's coming back. Who knows? It doesn't really say. And then she sees that the tomb is open and there's nobody there. First, she just sees that the tomb is open. She's not even close enough to see like that there's nobody in there. So let's think about that for a second. So then she runs and finds Peter. And I love it. John, he calls himself the disciple who Jesus loved. Side note, this is really funny. This is the whole reason why I wanted to talk about these passages, was because I was listening to a Joyce Meyer sermon. And yes, I know people have their opinions, but it was a good sermon. It was a good teaching. I take it for what it's worth. So anyway, she was talking about these two passages, and it just inspired me. And the Lord kept speaking more things to me that I just had to share. So... sorry, it's getting a little bright. A little bit too. There we go. Just feeling like I'm just shining so much. So, she mentioned how it probably was annoying that John always calls himself the disciple who Jesus loved. Like, I imagine Peter with his character just being like, the disciple who Jesus loved. Like... it's just so funny. So anyway, she runs to Peter and she's like, they have taken the Lord's body out of the tomb and we don't know where they have put him. So then this is the funny part. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this part. Peter and John start running, like they're racing to get to the tomb. This is so funny to me. They literally started running, and then it says that the other disciple outran Peter and got to the tomb first. So it's like he calls himself the one that Jesus loved. Excuse me. And he reaches the tomb first. That's just funny. Like he held on to that title. He really did. He sees, this is verse 5. He stooped and looked in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he didn't go inside. Then Peter goes inside. So this is the disciple Jesus loved, right? This is John. He's the one that he leans over at the Lord's Supper and he's like, Lord, who will betray you? And then Peter's the one who's like, what are you scared of? He's the daring one. He's the one who chops off the ear of the soldier, and that's Peter for you. So then Peter gets there. He gets there after John, but he's daring enough to actually go inside. So he sees the linen wrappings there. The cloth that covered Jesus' head was folded up, lying apart from the other wrappings. Now, if you study this passage, this is one of the most mind-blowing things ever. The reason why his linens were folded was because in those times, whenever somebody was at the dinner table and they were not done with their meal and they had to say use the restroom or go do something and they were coming back, they would leave their linens folded on the table. So the crazy thing here is that Jesus had his linens folded there, meaning that he was coming back. I know, like, wow. So they see this, and maybe they didn't immediately think about what that meant. Maybe they didn't make the connection of like, oh, well, when we're sitting at the dinner table, if you need to come back, you need to fold your napkins so they don't take your food away, because they need to know you're coming back. So then Jesus I don't know if they had a theological revelation in that moment. I have no clue. It doesn't register. It just says that they noticed that they were folded and that they were lying apart from the other wrappings. So then John, the other disciple, then he goes in, he saw, and he believed. For until then, they still hadn't understood the scriptures that said Jesus must rise from the dead. Now, this is so funny because they were told that Jesus must rise from the dead, but they didn't understand it. It seems fairly easy to understand, right? Like, someone tells you in your scriptures that you've been learning since you were a kid, so they're Jews, so you're like, okay, the Messiah, he has to die, but he has to come back from the dead. So they're like, okay, I don't understand. I don't get it. And you would think that's very obvious. It's exactly what it means, but the revelation wasn't there yet. So then this is the funny part. There's another funny part. I think a lot of it's funny because it's just the human reaction to the amazing, incredible events of God. So they don't understand. Then they understand that because God gives them the revelation at the moment, like, oh, he must rise from the dead, which means that he must be alive. It says they believe. So that means at the moment they were like, oh, he's not here. He's alive. Just, okay, got it. And then they went home. Fair enough. Okay. So then Jesus, the title of this next part is Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene. Mary was standing outside the tomb crying. So this whole time, John and Peter are racing. Peter goes in first. John goes in first. And Mary's just outside just like just weeping outside the tomb. They're over here like, okay, he's alive. Like he rose again. And she's over here just bawling her eyes out. And as she wept, she stooped and looked in. And she's the one who sees the two white-robed angels. One sitting at the head and the other at the foot of the place where the body of Jesus was lying. They said, "Dear woman, why are you crying?" The angels asked her. "Because they've taken away my Lord," she replied, "and I don't know where they've put him." She turned to leave and saw someone standing there. So this one, hold on. Mary just got me all sorts of... You just seen two angels in the tomb where Jesus was supposed to be. These angels spoke to you. You have no reaction other than just like, they took away Jesus. I don't know where he's at. There's two angels. Supernatural angels. Most people fall to their feet. They're terrified and the angels have to be like, fear not. You know, like most people have a crazy reaction, as they should, because if I saw an angel, I'd probably just pass out. I don't know, like I'd probably just be stunned and terrified because supernatural things are supernatural, like just crazy, you know, like they surpass your understanding. So she's just like crying and talking to them like no big deal. It reminds me of Hagar when she sees Jesus in the wilderness, like the angel of the Lord speaks to her after Sarah casts her out of the house, right? And she's just talking to him like no big deal. It's like, you're speaking to Jesus. You don't even know, but it's a whole other thing, right? So anyway, she's just like, I don't know where they put him. And she goes to turn around and leave when she just spoke to two angels. So then she turns around and she sees someone standing there and it's Jesus. But she didn't recognize him. So I imagine she probably turned around because she felt somebody was there. Right? Like normally you're kind of like just, you know, you're around and then you feel when somebody is entered the room or somebody is standing behind you and you're like, okay. And she didn't know it was him. And then he asked her the same thing. "Dear woman, why are you crying?" The same thing. That's just so funny to me. The same thing that the angels had asked her. And the funny thing is like, I feel like the angels did it on purpose. Like they asked exactly what he was going to ask. Or he asked the same thing that he knew that they were going to ask. Just to prove a point. Like just to be funny. Because I'm sure the angels knew Jesus was going to be there. Like I'm sure the angels probably saw him coming and they were just like, shh, don't say anything. Like, and he goes, "Who are you looking for?" She thought he was the gardener. She said, "Sir, if you've taken him away, tell me where you've put him, and I will go and get him. This whole time, she's just like, where did y'all put Jesus? Where is he? Like, y'all are just asking me why I'm crying. I told you, nobody's helping me find him. They took away my Lord, and you're just acting like everything's fine. Like, why are you crying? Because you would be crying too, but she didn't know. And this is the part that just melts my heart. He goes, Mary. It's almost like he's saying, like, Mary, like, Mary. She turned to him and cried out, Rabboni, which means teacher in Hebrew. This part just gets me in the feels, because all he had to say was her name. And just, I don't know how he said it. All it says is Mary with an exclamation point. But the fact that he called her name, that it woke something up in her, for her spirit to realize that's my Lord. That's the voice of my Lord. It was like, like when you haven't seen somebody in a while and they look a little bit different. Maybe they lost weight, they gained weight, they wear glasses now, or they don't anymore. They changed their hair a little bit. They just look different. And you just kind of like, you see them in a coffee shop. You're like, hey, what's up? How you been? And they're like, oh, I'm good. How are you? But they don't really recognize you, and then you just look at it and you're just like, hey, John. They're like, Amy. Like, then you have that moment of like, oh my God, it's you. And she had that moment with him. And then he goes, don't cling to me, for I haven't ascended to the Father yet. But go find my brothers and tell them I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene found the disciples, that's who he was talking about, his brothers, and told them, I have seen the Lord. Then she gave them his message. Next, he's going to appear to his disciples. That Sunday evening, this all happens in the same day, Sunday morning, Sunday evening. Mind you, Mary's been at the tomb since before dawn, like early morning. The disciples were meeting behind locked doors because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders. Suddenly, Jesus was standing there among them. It's crazy how he just shows up and nobody realizes he's there, and they don't know that it's him for like a good second. They're just chilling, doing what they do, before they realize like the Lord is among them. So he says, peace be with you. As he spoke, he showed them the wounds in his hands and in his side. Then they were filled with joy when they saw the Lord. So he had to show them like, hey, it's me. It's me. And then they were like, it's you. Again, he said, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you. This part shakes my core. I'm like, what? The kind of authority he gave these people. So he breathed on them and he said, receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, they're forgiven. If you don't forgive them, they're not forgiven. Like, how? That's crazy. So, I'm sorry. I just had Apple Jacks. So, I guess I'm just getting like a carb. Good. All right. Jesus appears then to Thomas, and this is where we get the whole doubting Thomas thing. Right, so one of the 12 disciples, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, was not with the others when Jesus came. I always wonder what Thomas was doing. He was always doing his own thing. Like, he was literally just out wilding out by himself. So then they told him, we have seen the Lord. And he said, I won't believe it until I see the nail wounds in his hands, put my fingers into them, and place my hand into the wound in his side. Now, I know that, a lot of people have discussed this portion and they say, well, it's because on the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus said, if anybody comes to you claiming to be the Messiah, blah, 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 and so he was very skeptical. He's like, no, I ain't going to believe just anybody is the Lord. I got to see it for myself. So some people try to defend Thomas, but Jesus doesn't really defend him. So 8 days later, and Thomas still doesn't believe that they saw Jesus. 8 days later, and Thomas didn't go out of his way to go find him. I mean, if it was me, I would have been like, show me, where is he at? I want to see him right now. I would have probably been Mary looking for him at the tomb. I mean, I don't know. So then this time Thomas was with them. Thomas always had his own thing, like his own business going on. I don't know what he was doing. The doors were locked again, but then Jesus was suddenly standing among them. The doors were locked, but Jesus got in there. How? He's Jesus. So then he says, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. Look at my hands. Put your hand into the wound in my side. Don't be faithless any longer. Believe. My Lord and my God, Thomas exclaimed. Then Jesus told him, you believe because you've seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me. Says. So then it goes to say that if they were to record all the things that Jesus did, there wouldn't be space in all the world to fit how big the book would be of all the things that Jesus and his disciples did. Epilogue, John chapter 21. Jesus appears to 7 disciples. Get ready for this. Later, Jesus appeared again to the disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. This is how it happened. Several of the disciples were there. Simon Peter, Thomas. Now Thomas is there. Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples. Simon Peter said, I'm going fishing. So, anybody remember what Peter was before Jesus called him? A fisherman. And what were some of the other disciples? Also fishermen. So, Peter, obviously, his character, so this is part of what Joyce Meyer was talking about. Like, his character is obviously somebody that's influential. So you see that they're obviously they're beside the Sea of Galilee. So they're probably sitting by the shore, just chilling, right? This is after they see Jesus. They know that he's alive. They know he came back. And they're just chilling. And then Simon Peter just says, I'm going fishing. So it's like, he went back to doing what he used to do. And I just wonder, like, what was he thinking? Like, was he just bored? Was he upset that, like, Jesus wasn't there at the moment? Or, well, anyway, so then the rest of the guys said, well, come too. So, like, Peter has that personality that when he does something, he gets up and does something. The other people around him are like, yeah, I'll follow you. And the sermon I was listening to, she did mention it's important that when you're in a position of leadership, you need to recognize that if you're going to make a decision, you may also pull other people to follow you. So you have to make sure you're doing the right thing. So this is the funny part. They go out in the boat and they caught nothing. So they went and did this thing on their own, right? And they weren't waiting for Jesus. They weren't using any sort of wisdom. They clearly were just kind of like, I'm going to go fishing. I'm just going to do what I used to do. And it's important for us to not go back to doing what we used to do before Christ just because we're in a waiting period of seeing what God's going to do. It's very important that we worship while we wait. We are obedient while we wait. And that we're not just doing our own thing. Because clearly the result was nothing. So then they were up all night doing this and they didn't catch anything. So then next day at dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but they didn't see that it was him. This is like the 3rd time that he's right there and nobody notices that it's him. And I'm sure he looked a little bit different, but they don't recognize him. And maybe it was like far away and it was like this, the sun's kind of coming up. So it's kind of like gloomy a little bit. You just can't really see well, whatever. But then he goes, children, have you caught any fish? And mind you, obviously these are grown behind men. It says fellows, but in the Greek, he's saying children. He's like, all right, boys, did you catch anything? And they don't realize that it's Jesus they're talking to. They think it's just some random onlooker, somebody who's just chilling there. Is like, hey, did y'all catch anything? Like maybe trying to see if they could get some fish from them or sell something to them, or who knows, you know? And then they're like, no. And then Jesus tells them, throw out your net on the right hand side of the boat and you'll get some. So they did, and they couldn't bring in the net because there were so many fish in it. Then the disciple Jesus loved, here we go again with John, he said, it's the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic. So I guess, do they fish naked? Did fishermen fish naked? Or like, are they in their undies or something? Because he said he put on his tunic because he had stripped for work. So I'm like, strip like naked or like strip to like your undergarments? Or like, I don't know. That's something I'll have to research. But that part, very interesting. So he jumped into the water, headed to shore. So he gets off the boat, jumps in the water, goes back to shore to go see Jesus. The others stayed with the boat and pulled the loaded net to the shore, for they were only about 100 yards from the shore. So when they got there, they found breakfast waiting for them. Fish cooking over a charcoal fire and some bread. Breakfast was waiting for them. So not only did they not realize it was Jesus, they just saw him yesterday. They go in and do their own thing fishing without nobody's permission, nobody's blessing. They didn't even do it right. Caught nothing all night. Go there the next morning. And Jesus, he could have easily been like, ye fish without my wisdom and permission, and that is why you have caught nothing. No, Jesus met them where they were and prepared them breakfast. He made them what they needed to start the day. He cooked them some fresh fish and bread. And he's like, come and have some breakfast. That's like if you wake up and your grandpa or your grandma like, all right, Sonny, come on, baby, come and eat your pancakes and bacon and some toast and French toast and all the toast and English muffins and eggs and everything, and there's fruit and there's juice and everything, a coffee, and like, all right, come and have some breakfast. And it says that there were 153 large fish. The fact that number is there shows how detailed God is, right? So then now none of them asked, who are you? Because they knew it was Jesus. And Jesus served them the bread and the fish. So not only did he cook for them early in the morning, after he tells them how to get the fish, he cooks them breakfast and he serves it to them. And it says this was the third time Jesus has appeared to his disciples since he had been raised from the dead. So after breakfast, then Jesus starts talking to Peter. And this is when he asks him, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? And I'm not going to go into that whole portion because I want to focus on what we've read beforehand. So God is a loving Father, right? And he will discipline us if we need it. He will tell us when we're wrong. He'll confront us. He does it with love. He doesn't want to hurt us, but he will allow us to go through difficult situations that will hurt us so that we learn if we're not listening and obeying the first time. Sometimes we need to learn by slipping and hurting ourselves or by making our own decisions and realizing consequences. And God, just like a father on earth would, sometimes you got to let your child slip up a little bit so they can see for themselves why they should listen to you the first time. All within reason. You don't let your child just put their hand on a hot stove just so they can learn. No. But if you did everything you could to stop them and they still do it, they're going to learn on their own. Right? So, mind you, Thomas had just doubted him, right? The night before. Jesus still served him breakfast the next day. Because he was there. He was one of the ones that was there. Peter makes them all go fishing. Sorry, I'm getting all congested. He takes everybody fishing. They don't catch a single thing. How much effort are we putting into doing something that God never told you to do? Like, I feel like a lot of people nowadays they're starting businesses. They're starting small businesses. They are doing startups. They're going into a field or a school or something. And God never told you to do that. And you can say, well, Amy, like we have free will. We can do pretty much whatever we want. And then God blesses it, or he will just interrupt us if need be. I'm a firm believer, based on what I've read in the Bible, that you should, like it says in Proverbs and a lot of other places in the Bible, before you do things, make decisions, you should always consult with the Lord. Now, I'm not saying you're going to go on a 3-day prayer and fasting to see if you should eat McDonald's for breakfast. That's what we have wisdom for. If you're filled with the Holy Spirit and you ask God for wisdom, you can make, small decisions like that throughout the day on your own, right? Because it's wisdom from the Lord, because you're full of the Lord, you get it. But when it comes to something that's going to take a big portion of your life, when it comes to something that is going to affect the people around you, namely if you're married, your spouse, your children, or your family, your immediate family members, if you're a pastor, your church, if you're a leader, those who are, subjected to you, those who are in, under your leadership, if you're a teacher, your students, whoever it is that you're influencing, you need to take into account how the decisions you make are going to affect them as well, not just you. But we don't need to ask God for forgiveness if we just ask him for permission first. So how does this have to do with forgiveness or disobedience or sinning, not sinning? Well, the Bible says that if you know what you're supposed to do and you don't do it, that is also sin. And if you don't do what you're supposed to do, wait, did I just say that? Or if you do what you're not supposed to do, that's also sinning. That's a sin of omission and sin of commission. Like, you do what you're not supposed to do and you don't do what you should do. Those are both sin. So how can this relate to you making such a decision, such as like, I'm going to go fishing? Well, say, you decided, I'm going to go into nursing school. Just a random example. Nobody, please don't take this personal. It's literally just random, straight out of my head, out of my mouth. And you never prayed about it. You didn't say, God, I would like to be a nurse one day. I think it's a good career. I think it would make my family some money. I think I could be there long term. I see myself serving in a hospital and bringing other people to you through my service. You didn't go to God about it. You just said, nurses make good money. I'm going to go become a nurse. So then you go and you go through all the heartache and the headaches of going throughout the application process, taking all the tests, the prerequisites, doing everything you possibly have to do to get into nursing school. And then you go into nursing school. Now you don't have time for family. You don't have time for friends. You're depressed. You're lonely. You're overworked. You're overburdened because now you have to still work while you're in school. It's expensive. It's hard because nursing school is hard. And now you're regretting doing this when it's like, God never told you to do that. You brought it upon yourself. So now you might be even praying like, God, get me out of this, or God, help me through this, and he's like, listen, honey, like, you got yourself into this. Like, you got to find a way out. I'll be merciful on you and I'll help you here and there. But there's some things that's like, you put yourself in there now. You got to get your butt out of there. So either you finish nursing school and you reap the consequences of like ignoring your family for 2 years to do something that maybe you're going to like, maybe you're not. But you see how like a rash decision like that, like you don't think it's that big of a deal. Or like say, you go to get a second job. God didn't tell you to get a second job, but you were worried about finances. So then you're like, okay, well, now I'm going to work on my days off. And now you don't have any time for family, for friends, for God. You don't have a lot of time for church. You're feeling burdened. You're feeling overworked. You're feeling stressed. Why? Because you're not giving yourself the opportunity to rest. You were the one who took it upon yourself to get a second job. God never told you to get a second job. So now you're like, I want to quit. I've only been there a few months. He never told you to do it. So something that you think is so small as a decision to make is something that's actually pretty big to God, because if you would just ask him first and wait for him to tell you what he wants you to do, then you would avoid a lot of heartaches and headaches. A lot of times we go through unnecessary trials and tribulations and hardships in our life because we put ourselves there. And if you would just wait on God, if you would just listen to his voice and say, God, and be patient. Like, you can't just say, I'm waiting on God. Hey, God, is it time yet? Like, you got to wait. You got to be patient. because God is working and he has a plan. But if you're not patient, you're going to make decisions that are going to affect your life. And they could even affect you spiritually. You know, you could put yourself in a situation where spiritually you end up hurting yourself because you didn't wait on the Lord. You did things on your own strength, on your own wisdom, by your own will. And you didn't say, God, what is your will for my life? Do you want me to apply for this job? Do you want me to interview here? Should I take this job offer? Should I walk through that door? Is this, do you want me to stop working for a few months? Do you want me to take a break? Do you want me to go over here for my vacation? Do you want me to take my kids to this thing? Should I go to this party? Should I go here? Should I do this? You know, if you would just ask and wait to see what he has to say, he will answer you. And here's the thing with me. It's like, if as a Christian, you ask God for wisdom, he gives you wisdom, right? Like I said, to make basic decisions every day. You don't need to wait for God to answer you from the altar by a prophet to tell you shouldn't go to a worldly party. It's common sense as a Christian. It is. It's common sense. It's wisdom. If there's going to be stuff there that's going to tempt you to sin, don't go there. Simple as that. You don't need a revelation from the Lord. You don't need fire to come down from heaven like Elijah. You don't need that. But even when we make mistakes like that, even when we do things on our own and we kind of like screw up a little bit, God still is going to meet us the next day and say, hey, I made you breakfast. Because he loves us so friggin' much. He loves us that much that he is like, yeah, I know you did things on your own. You didn't consult with me. You didn't ask me. But I know you need to eat. I'm still your Jehovah Jireh. I still provide. I still have some fresh cooked fish for you and bread. Come and eat. And I love that he knows probably the state of mind that Peter's in. Peter probably feels a little downcast. He's probably like, man, I didn't even know it was Jesus. I went fishing and he was there and I don't even know what I was doing. I didn't catch anything. And then Jesus tells me, and then now I catch something. So Jesus feeds him and then he starts to confront him. God, he's so wise, right? And often this is something that we could do ourselves, with your spouse, with your best friend, with a person in church that maybe you're having an issue with, or somebody at work. Don't talk to people when they're hungry. Like, don't talk to people when they haven't eaten. If it's before lunchtime and after breakfast, people are getting hungry and they're getting hangry. Don't confront somebody at that hour. Don't talk to somebody if you know they haven't slept well. Don't talk to somebody about something serious if you know that they just went through something really difficult. It's just something so simple, but we can get so much out of it, and even with, Mary Magdalene, how he goes to, he presents himself to her. Jesus is so interested in our lives. Like, he went personally and showed himself to these people. Personally. He didn't just appear in a mountain and let them just see him like, oh, look, there's Jesus. Like, he appeared to them personally. He cared about the relationship he had formed with each of them individually. And that to me is so special because Jesus every day is wanting that relationship with us. Jesus every single day is wanting to make us breakfast. He's already made breakfast. He has his word. The Bible. That's our daily bread. And he's made it fresh for us every single day to sustain us. And it's like, we want to go through life and we don't eat the breakfast. You know how hard it is when you make somebody fresh breakfast and they walk out on you and they ignore you because they're in a rush. So they didn't make time. They got up late. And Jesus made breakfast early in the morning, in the dawn. So they couldn't be like, oh, it's late in the morning, we got to go. Like, he made it early so they didn't even have an excuse to leave. And many of us, we won't even get up early to talk to God. We'll just go about our day and we wonder, oh, why am I feeling so lonely? Why am I so depressed? Why do I feel so anxious? Well, you didn't eat. You didn't eat your breakfast. He made it for you and you left it there and now it's cold. Breakfast is made to be eaten in the morning. Yes, I know. We could eat breakfast any time of the day. Sometimes I want pancakes at 3 o'clock. That's fine. But it's made to be in the morning because you're breaking fast. The fasting of the days before. And we need to stop missing out on breakfast. We need to open up our days and eat our breakfast fresh with the Lord. Sit down and eat with him. Whatever he's cooked for us that day. You know, and the thing is, like, it's fish and bread. I'm sure they eat fish and bread all the time. But people don't get tired of eggs and bacon, pancakes and syrup, you know, like avocado toast. You could eat the same thing for breakfast for years and you don't get tired of it because it's something that you know you need, something that's tasty and something that sustains you. But I feel like some people they don't want to eat breakfast from Jesus anymore because they're like, it's the same thing every day. It's always the bread. It's always the fish and the bread. I'm tired of fish and bread. You know, and it's not. I mean, yeah, it's the same food because his word never changes. It's the same word, same Bible. But the amount of revelation you get from reading the word every single day is like immeasurable. You can never know. You can never say you know all the Bible because you'll read the same passage and 30 years later you'll see it and it'll blow your mind again in a totally different way. But I think as Christians, we need to eat breakfast with Jesus. We need to eat what he's made us and not complain and not skip out on it, not rush away because we're late for work. No, we need to organize our lives, prioritize getting up, starting our day with him. And this is something I'm working on too because I don't like getting up super early. And with the job I'm in now, I have to get up earlier than I would like to. But I have been prioritizing when I get my phone, opening the Bible app. Like to turn off my alarm, but like I open the Bible app and I pray for a little bit before I even get out of bed, before I even go and try to check my other apps or messages or Facebook or whatever. And it's something small, but it's like I want to make sure that he's first. Because the first thing that enters your body, that's what changes all your levels. You know, that's how your body reacts to insulin. It's how your body reacts to all the hormones and all the proteins and carbs that you're getting. It's going to send that everywhere it needs to go so you can start your day after having slept for 6 to 8 hours, however much you sleep. So in every season that you go through, whether you're mourning like Mary and you're just so sad, you feel like God is so far away from you. He's right there. He's standing right behind you. You know, just turn around. Sometimes in our sorrow, in our deep, deep, deep sorrow, where our soul is in anguish. And, you know, David went through this a lot. A lot of the prophets and people in the Old Testament went through this a lot. They were just in such deep sorrow. In those hard moments, still acknowledge God. And don't be so caught up in your tears that you can't see that he's right there. You know, and I have experienced this. I'm still going through the grieving process after losing my dad in March. They say that it takes about 1.5 to 2 years to start healing from a big loss in your life. Because, you know, you go through shock, the acceptance, all the holidays. You know, it's just a lot. It's a big process of losing somebody who was a big part of your life. And even if you saw it coming and it was a peaceful process and everything. And I'll make another video eventually about the testimony of how God worked even to the death of my father. But even in your anguish and your sorrow, acknowledge God. See that he's there. Because he wants to be there for you. And he is your sustenance even in the darkest, most sad, depressing times in your life. You know, and he still wants to make you breakfast. Because when you're sad and depressed, you still need to eat. When you don't want to do anything and you're just lacking motivation, you still need to get up and eat. You know, you want to lay there and die like the prophets in the Old Testament, you still need to eat. And he's made you breakfast. Even in your doubt, get rid of your doubt and believe what God is doing in your life. Believe what God is doing in your life before he does it. And I will make another video about this very soon about faith and believing even when you can't see. Because believe it or not, faith is something that the church lacks nowadays. A lot of people are believing God just what they see, and they're not believing what they don't see. And I'm going to encourage you that don't be like Thomas. If you hear God is working in your friend's life, don't be so quick to dismiss it. Don't say, oh yeah, I'll see it later. We'll see if they testify about it. We'll see if that's really God. Believe God for them. Believe that God is working, even if it sounds crazy. They might need you to be like, the 4 crazy friends that took their paralytic friend and dropped them in through the roof. You might need to believe for somebody else. Don't be a Thomas. Be like Simon and be like John, who ran. And they're like, oh, the tomb, it's open. Let's go see. And be like Jesus. Be the one who serves. When everybody else is going through their own little tough time, when everybody else is kind of disheveled, Jesus knew how they were feeling. They were kind of caught off guard. Like, they're like, we just lost our Savior. Then he came back. Now I don't know where he is. But now he's back again. And now he made me breakfast. Sometimes you don't need to ask anybody, what can I do for you? Sometimes you just need to do. Sometimes you don't need to ask people, hey, let me know if you need something. Most people don't even know how to answer that. But if you just bring them a warm meal, maybe you just say, hey, I got you a gift card so you and your husband can go out to eat. Hey, I ordered you some groceries from Walmart. Hey, let me take the dogs out for you today. Let me take your car for a car wash. Sometimes you don't need to ask people what to do. You just need to do, and serve. Be there for other people. Be Jesus in other people's lives. Not be their God. Be the one who serves. Be the one who looks for other people's needs before themselves. Sometimes we're over here like, man, I'm so hungry. I wish somebody would come and make me breakfast. Maybe God is waiting for you, the one, to get up early and make other people breakfast. You ever thought about that? No, because you only think about yourself. I'm just kidding. I love saying that. But let's be the one who serves. Let's be the one who's different. Let's be the one who runs to the tomb first. Let's be the one who looks in the tomb. Let's be them. Let's do that. Let's walk by faith, not by sight. Let's love, let's serve, and put others before ourselves. So Jesus made you breakfast. Go on, go eat.